So we're going to be talking about two houses. There's going to be some differences in how they approach this, and some pros and cons on both sides. And that is non-living renewable energy on the left, living renewable energy on the right. Two different approaches. We'll see how they turn out. So the first thing is you have solar energy, which is the driving force behind the vast majority of renewable energy, directly or indirectly. And both houses are going to be exposed to that solar energy. In the summertime, it's going to heat it, lighting, and all that kind of loveliness. On the non-living side, you can have a passive solar design of the house that takes advantage of, in the summertime, a great percentage of the sun's time is spent high in the sky, and in the wintertime, it doesn't get as high. It's lower in the sky for a greater percentage of the time. Because of that, if you have your roof overhangs designed in such a way, you can take advantage of that, where you get shading in the summer sun. So, for instance, here we're showing that, where the sun is coming down and it's shading some of the house from the overhang of the roof. But non-living isn't the only one with that trick. The living side can use trees, and trees can actually provide a larger amount of shade. There'd be some gaps between the leaves, but there'll be shade. Now, on the passive design, the sun is beating on the roof, which makes it hot. So that's a disadvantage per se. Where on the living side, the heat is on the trees, which has a much further air distance before it gets to the house. So the living side has an advantage there. So on the non-living side, you can put up something like photovoltaic solar panels. Now, those solar panels will convert some of the solar energy into electricity, depending on the panel. Old designs and old technology would be maybe about 10%, and some of the newer ones are in the low 20s. Satellite grid solar cells get all the way up into the upper 30s, low 40s for the percentage of conversion. And that has an edge because photosynthesis varies from plant to plant conditions, but it can be anywhere from 1% up to as high as like 9 point something percent. So a greater percentage of the solar energy coming in, the non-living side has an advantage of converting more of that into a different form of energy than heat. So that's an edge on the non-living side. Those photovoltaic panels also provide shade onto the house. It's not quite as far away as the tree was, but it does provide some of that effect. And because of producing electricity is a very versatile energy source that can be used for all kinds of things, including running active window air conditioners and so forth. So you may have noticed that the tree and plants don't get super hot in the sun. And you say, well, it only was converting a small percentage, photosynthesizing. Well, but the other thing that the trees and living organisms do that are photosynthesizing is that they evaporate a lot of water. A mature oak tree can evaporate something like 40,000 gallons a year of water. And that's a lot of evaporative cooling of the air around it, which is an advantage in the summer on that side. But on the non-living side, they could install an evaporative cooler there too. That is a technological thing, and that would allow them to take advantage of evaporative cooling abilities from an energy point of view. But they would have to be spending some of the energy advantage they got from the solar panels to power that. Now, one disadvantage of evaporative coolers is that they're very dependent on relative humidity and things like that. So whether it's the trees doing it, or the mechanical, technological, non-living device doing evaporative cooling, either way, just evaporative cooling in general has a limitation based on relative humidity of the air. Now, on the non-living side, instead of doing a evaporative cooler, which is kind of more dependent on conditions, something a little less dependent and is a greater advantage more often would be something like a heat pump. You could do an air source heat pump or a geothermal heat pump, and that's an advantage because below ground, the temperature doesn't vary as much, and there's a lot more thermal mass than in the air temperature. And heat pumps have the advantage of being able to multiply. So instead of, say, 1 unit of energy to heat or cool something, it takes less than that 1 unit of energy to just move energy from point to point. So you could get the equivalent of 3, 4, 5, or whatever units of heating or cooling energy by only spending 1 unit of energy. And that's an advantage to heat pumps, especially high-efficiency geothermal heat pumps. The non-living also has one other trick up its sleeve. They do have what they call a PVT, or photovoltaic thermal panel, that does the photovoltaic electric conversion we talked about, say 10 to low 20%. And then of the remaining that gets converted to heat, unlike the tree, which is just going away into the atmosphere, it can be harnessed for hot water use in the house, stored in that geothermal underground as a big thermal battery, and otherwise put to use, which allows you to even further utilize the solar energy that's available. Now, in the wintertime, the leaves have all fallen off the tree, and the sun is now at a lower point in the sky. So the living renewable energy side on the right is no longer shaded by that tree. Therefore, it's getting more solar heating in the house. And the passive solar on the left, because of the careful design of the overhangs and the design of that passive solar house, it's able to also get solar energy coming in. The non-living side still has a little bit of shading from those solar panels on the roof that the living side doesn't have. The living side has some shading from the remaining trunk of the tree. But now the roof of the living side is being heated more than it was in the summertime. Now the living side has another trick. You can take the leaves that and grass clippings throughout the year, all that kind of just biomass, that whatever, and you can compost it into a big compost pile. You can see there on the right hand side, and as it decomposes, you'll get and John Payne did a method, and there's a biomailer. But basically, as a compost pile functions, it heats up on the inside. You could also have a biodigester that's producing methane, and either way, that would be getting into the house. A more conventional way might be to use something like a chimney there with a fireplace, or you do a high efficiency, like EPA rated catalytic wood stove to try to get low emissions, but still use the biomass that way. Would be another option that it could try to produce some heat in the winter. Now, both options have the option for energy storage. On the non-living side, you can store, for instance, the heat, hot or cold, in the geothermal reserve in the ground, or in an insulated thermal mass, whether it be a cement slab or water, or a phase change material, or in batteries. So you can store it on the non-living side. And that, if it's storing electricity, you can run a car and power your house and all that kind of stuff. On the living side, you're storing as a biomass. They got leaves, you got wood, you got all those things, and it's stored in that biomass, and which you're then using in, say, the compost pile to generate heat from the microbes, or in a biodigester, you're producing some heat, but mainly you're producing methane. Or you have the wood you're going to use in a high efficiency, low polluting, like EPA certified wood stove. So you have energy storage in either case. Just it kind of forms a little differently. And if you're trying to run a car on, say, the living side, then you're going to have to do something to get to electricity to use the methane to run a generator, or convert a combustion engine to run on methane. So there's some, or wood gas. There's ways to do that as well. And of course, we're not going to forget the non-living side can do wind power and use some of that. I can't think of any living organism that lets you do that. And non-living lets you have water. You can use water power if you have that resource available for a stream or something like that. I guess you could technically try to use the water evaporation of the tree as a mechanism to develop a pumping system, but you'd still be needing a non-living thing to do anything with it afterwards, when it comes back down. So those are some other advantages of or other aspects of renewable energy that can be tapped by non-living side. So overall, I would say both styles of systems are not mutually exclusive. Someone could use elements of both in their design, of course. And overall, I would say the non-living side has an advantage in that it can be deployed and up and running much faster than the living side. The living side, the compost pile needs time to be inoculated, and for them to grow, and time for the tree to grow, and the transition is slow. Where the non-living side can be installed, and turned on and off quickly. I would also say that the non-living side has a overall net efficiency advantage. Between insulating and design and so forth. There are some edges that it has there. However, the living side does have some advantages in that non-toxic materials. You're talking about leaves and trees and things like that, and you have hazardous waste like batteries and whatever to get rid of at the end of service life. It also has the living side also has the advantage of being less out of pocket material wise for the components. You don't have to pay the microorganisms to give you the methane. You don't have to pay the microorganisms to do the composting. You don't have to pay the tree to give you the leaves and the shade and so forth. Both systems, I would say, to have someone not be disappointed with them, should be well designed and by someone knowledgeable in the application, so it gets done correctly. Or someone could just tinker with it if they're okay tinkering. I'm a bit of a tinkerer, but I would say there are options on both sides. They can be intermixed or used all together or whatever, but those are just some things I wanted to review. Thank you.